Hello and welcome to this edition of the Deep Dive Perspective. We never disappoint you with the guests that we have on our shows, and we don't disappoint you with actually going for the jugular on any given issue we tackle. Today, it's Palestine. How could it not be? We have evidently a ceasefire, a so-called ceasefire, but you know what ceasefires are to the Israelis and to the Zionists. They're literally something you can throw in the garbage. The last time they did a ceasefire, between January and March, they ended up killing hundreds of people and continuing all of their normal violence, children included. So will this ceasefire hold? We don't know. Perhaps it's not even relevant because the reality is Palestine is not free. The reality is Zionism isn't outlawed. The reality is also that Israel isn't dismantled. So there is so much that isn't there. And of course, just because there's the so-called genocide is halted, which it isn't really, because the rest of Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran is all on the menu for further genocidal destruction by the Israeli entity, the regime they call a state. Well, in the studio, I have with me two activists. I can best describe it in the most simplest terms, but the activism, I'd like to really go into what they do, because first of all, it's Ousman Noor, barrister, but also founder of Protect Palestine, a movement which is advocating the military intervention to support and save Palestinians and Gazans, something which should have been done a long time ago by state leaders, but of course, cowards that most of them are and pliant to the Zionist agenda, they dare not go there. But of course, these sort of individuals have. And we've also got a track record with Ousman. Welcome to the show, Ousman.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
They've been after you as well. Of course, the establishment has done all sorts of things. We'll go into maybe some of the things that they've done to try and cancel or censor or stop your movement, I think, during the questioning. But we got the pleasure of also welcoming Lubna Speitan. Lubna is a Palestinian, a British Palestinian artist and activist, co-founder of the Greenwich Palestine Alliance, and her work focuses on anti-genocide advocacy and grassroots. She also holds the dual role of equality officer and Palestine officer for the GLAB Unite community. I hope I got that right. But welcome to the show, Lubna. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. Great to be with you both. Thank you.
And after that slightly lengthy introduction, let's get straight into it. I've talked about dismantling Israel, and I've talked about really outlawing Zionism, really rather on par with Nazism. The way that Nazism was dealt with at the end of the Second World War is where I always think logically justice actually is in terms of the Palestine question. But we're constantly given this idea of peace without justice being something that's okay. We're constantly given this idea of coexistence with a genocidal set of people with racist apartheid values and beliefs. And yet we're supposed to sort of smile along and say it's okay. Now, I know that you have a very powerful stance on this, both of you. But let me start with you, Ousman. Why did you set up, for instance, Protect Palestine? That was the first thing that comes to mind. What motivated you?
Yeah, we've been held back by the way that propaganda works on Palestine. Noam Chomsky said that the whole point of propaganda is to narrowly constrain the acceptable limits of debate. And our response to the genocide has been very limited, basically held back by wrong concepts, by misunderstandings at best, but really ignorance or arrogance at worst. Let's talk about the ceasefire, right? There is no ceasefire. There has never been any ceasefire since Israel was created, and that's because the entire purpose and intention of Israel was to exterminate and ethnically cleanse Palestinians, and they've been doing that non-stop since its inception. And this idea of a ceasefire is fundamentally wrong because it presumes that there is a conflict. There isn't a conflict. There is an extermination. The world's most powerful military against a population that doesn't actually have an official army, navy, or air force, that has been under siege for 18 years. Half of the population of Gaza were children. And yet we talk about this being a conflict. It's an extermination, and we need to recognize that that's what it is if we are to talk about the right solution to it.
Well, the Zionist media, Piers Morgan particularly, would have taken you up and said, well, forget all that. That's irrelevant. Do you condemn Hamas? So literally, do you condemn the right of Palestinians to an armed resistance?
Not only do I not condemn Hamas, but I applaud the political objectives of Hamas. I applaud the political objectives of Hezbollah, and I applaud the political objectives of all of the terrorist organizations that have been deemed as such, because they have recognized what Israel actually is and have taken the only solution to actually dealing with it. When you are dealing with a genocidal state, the point of genocide is that they have an intention to physically destroy Palestinian life. They are committed to it. They do not care ultimately about public opinion. They don't care about international public opinion. They don't care about our condemnations or us shaming them. What we need to do is actually physically stop the extermination, physically dismantle the IOF. And this is what I talk about propaganda. We have not been talking about this solution. So you asked me the question, why did I set up Protect Palestine, was to articulate this, articulate the demand for military intervention, actually to support the armed resistance in a meaningful way, not just to tweet about them or to write about them, but to send troops, send missiles, send military navies to stop the siege, to actually do what is needed to get rid of the IOF. They're not going to do it unless we do it. So we need to start talking about that if we are serious about actually stopping the genocide.
Yeah, very powerful stuff. Lubna, come in on this, because a lot's been fired there within that short space, and you have been really on the ground fighting. And as a Palestinian yourself, you feel and know about what this is, the armed resistance aspect, the other resistance aspects on the ground, far better than I would or many others. Give me your take on some of the things that we raised, just an overview of the ceasefire, of what Palestinians should do now, and is it that the capitulation which Donald Trump clearly wants in his so-called peace deal, is it a capitulation that should happen, or should there be an escalation?
Absolutely an escalation. I mean, I agree with everything Brother Ousman has said. There is no ceasefire, and there will never be a ceasefire or an end to their oppression until the occupation is removed. There has to be, and the only solution will ever be, a single democratic Palestinian state. Zionism, Israel, needs to be dismantled in the same way we challenge and dismantle the South Africa apartheid, because what remains is you have a state, at best, it is an apartheid state, at worst, committing genocide. And our people have been enduring for decades what I regard as a long, slow, drawn-out genocide. This has all been about the erasure of our people, the extermination of the Palestinians. And what we've witnessed for the last 2 years is a genocide literally ramped up on steroids. That's what it is. And now it's a major land grab. We've got Trump with his Riviera project, Blair ranking in. I mean, it's like, what right do they have? And as they do, infamously, is they always demonize the right of the resistance. Anyone who opposes colonial resistance and colonial oppression and resists is demonized, as we know, as terrorists. They do this to deny us our right to resist, which, as you know, we do have that right under international law and UN charters, but they try to disallow us from exercising that right by the delegitimization of our resistance. So yes, I think what needs to be done is we need to continue to oppose the prescription of Hamas and any other resistance, because that is the only reason that they do it. And now you've got the PA who throw their own people under the bus out there telling us to disarm, won't even allow the media to come and report. You know, the absolute hypocrisy. Until their occupation ends and we remove those apartheid walls and the checkpoints, there will never be peace. We've seen, and I've grown up watching my whole life, the periodic carpet bombings, as they call mowing the lawn, how they try to reduce our population, how our family are constantly torn from their homes, forced to flee, assassinated. You know, our cousins, how many times they've been imprisoned and tortured, like for nothing other than being Palestinians. It is their way to remind us constantly our boot will always be around your necks. This is what happens even if you think of resisting. To give an example, and I just came back 7 weeks ago from the West Bank visiting my family. It's a horror show. I mean, they've slaughtered 56 of our relatives in Gaza already. And now in the West Bank, they're increasing attacks. They've just annexed the town where my family are living. They've forced them out of their homes. One of my cousins taken. No one knows where he is, what the hell they're doing to him. This is what the world is permitting us to continue living under if we don't challenge and dismantle their racist apartheid Zionist state. In the same way that we oppose the Holocaust of the Jews and Nazi Germany, we must too oppose the Zionist Israeli state. This is today's Nazi Germany. This is what is happening today. And unless we stop it, and it has to be through whatever means is necessary, whether it's international military intervention or us mobilizing worker-led action from the ground here, in short, they need to be isolated economically, morally, legally, in every way possible. We cannot let Palestinians go back to how they've been forced to live and what they've been forced to endure for the last decades plus. There has to be an end.
One of the statistics that comes to mind, there are so many I've got in my mind, and some I've got on my phone here. But one of them that comes to mind is the way simple things like Mr. Infantino, the head of FIFA, and his response to Russia when they invaded Ukraine. Within 100 days, they were banned from every football competition in the world. And still are. They were completely banned, left, right, and centre, all their teams at every level. Come to Israel, 2 years on, it's difficult for even something as banal as the football outfits to acknowledge that Israel shouldn't be accepted. So, Ousman, tell me a little bit about this hypocrisy within the establishment.
Yeah.
How deep does this kind of influence of Zionism go, and the fear of Zionists or the fear of Israel? What is this fear about?
Look, I'm going to talk about this use of the word hypocrisy. It's so obvious. We know this. And I think it's becoming our own fault for not solving it. It is happening because we don't have power. It's as simple as that. They kill Palestinians because they don't have power, and Israel does, raw power, which is the ability to exterminate. Now, we can keep on saying hypocrisy, double standards, which we know, it's so obvious. Unless we're ready to change that, and I think we are now at that point where the global majority sees Israel for what it is, we have to now crystallize that into meaningful power on the ground in Palestine. This is starting to change now. Of course, we already have the existing armed resistance. I mentioned them earlier. They should be supported. And we're starting to see Colombia, President Gustavo Petro, with a historic solidarity and commitment to the Palestinian cause as a president of a state, calling for a non-UN armed protective force to end the occupation and apartheid. He is backed by a group of other states, including Bolivia. Bolivia was the first country in the world to cut ties with Israel. Lots of Arab states haven't done that, right? Bolivia did that. We have South Africa supporting armed. South Africa in October 2023 called for a rapid protection force. We should have been backing that then, right? So this is a potential opportunity. Imagine a coalition of these states sending navies to actually break the siege. I don't think Israel is capable of declaring war on 8 countries. They're not declaring war. They're here to break the siege. Would Israel bomb all 8 of them? It's a simple mechanism. Send your militaries. What does it require? Political confidence, which is why I'm kind of dismayed at the Palestine organized activism. I was at the protest yesterday. No one was talking about military intervention. I was there now talking about it, and most people, unfortunately, on the left, even Muslims, people who talk about peace, are completely incapable. Not incapable, just not realizing the simple truth that Israel has to be defeated militarily, and in fact go against this message. And that's something that we need to solve.
That's really concerning. And it's something that's brushed under the carpet and probably hasn't been talked about, very much. The likes of David Miller have started confronting it. Loki has started raising the issue. They've started bringing up statistics and facts which are uncomfortable in terms of the way these organizations are made up and the kind of influence and friends that they have at very high levels seems concerning, because a lot of those friends and those associates have strong links with Mossad and links with the Zionist network. That is really concerning, that if there's a whole movement which is saying it's for Palestinian liberation or freedom, At the same time, they're not willing to say that Israel should be shut down, because they seem to always be sitting in the middle, saying we're going to protect Israel's right to exist, but we're going to create some piecemeal, raggy-tag, what do they call them? Banana Republic style, controlled, totalitarian, controlled Palestinian Authority. I mean, that's the best they can do. But that's the loudest voice within the Palestinian movement, and everybody seems to fall behind it. I'm going to come to Lubna. You've been an activist. As a Palestinian, do you think there's an element of controlled opposition almost there, even around this kind of this phenomena that Ousman's raised? Sorry, Lubna, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there has been, and there is a lot of opposition. I mean, we've come head to head with it, several times, even in political parties. There's several problems. I mean, even the undercurrent, unconscious, I hate to use the word Islamophobic, but it's anti-Muslim hate or anti-Muslim discrimination. We have to change the terminologies that we use on these things. And to be clear, I mean, there's many who, for example, I just on a small example, would call for, we support the existence of a single Palestinian democratic secular state. And I have to then explain to them, well, I'm sorry, but who are you to impose your godless ideologies to a majority Muslim population? It is only down to the Palestinians to democratically elect who they want to govern them. It shouldn't be anyone else's place to suggest or implant their ideologies onto us. That's number one. You've seen across the movement, there's a sweeping, the state repression mechanisms taking place, the silencing of groups like, demonizing and prescribing Palestine action, the taking non-violent direct action. It is scaremongering tactics in order to silence people. You've got the smear campaigns, which, as you may mention, David Miller, he's one of many academics smeared with the use of this discriminatory IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and then there's the Jerusalem Declaration and equally flawed alternatives that we've been giving many talks on, myself with Chaim and Ilan Pappin. We've worked closely on this together. It is being weaponized to silence voices, to shield Israel from criticism, and to conflate anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And these are all part of the operators designed to silence and suppress us. People are afraid to speak out. They don't know the arguments to use. They're afraid of being arrested. People are having to learn the laws, learn their rights. I myself, you have to learn this so that you can oppose it. And we have to smash those barriers so we can get to the next stage, to expose what Zionism is. And once we understand and educate people enough to understand that Zionism is a racist ideology, Israel can only exist on the subjugation of our people. Therefore, and it's not a matter of two-sidism, there is the occupier and the occupied. It is quite simple. And where do you stand? You cannot stand and support the existence of a racist apartheid state and stand for what is just or equality. It must be dismantled. It is a racist ideology, and it is as simple as that. And I think it's important that we educate, we reiterate, we agitate. We have to be out there and say it. And it's important that also Palestinian voices are raised and listened to, because a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people are just learning what Palestine is over the last few years. We know what it is. We know what we've had to live with, what my father has endured. And when he's here being told by a bunch of racists, I don't know if I can get swearing on here, but when he's told, fuck off back to your country, I have to then explain, do you understand? It's because of your country that people like my father, who are expelled from their land, are forced to countries like this. Understand, under the Balfour Declaration and the Sykes-Picot carving up of our regions, it's historical. And if you want to stop that, then stop the occupation, stop fueling the apartheid. There's a long list more, but it's a whole subject in itself. But yeah, that's my answer in short to that.
Well, it's fascinating to really cut loose and talk very openly about these things. There are two kinds of war. One is the one that we've been talking about, the war in terms of weapons and arms and whatever. It's clear that you guys are saying, yes, armed resistance is a legitimate right. It's a right enshrined in the UN Charter, etc. Yet somehow Israel seems to be able to twist a Palestinian resistance into being some sort of aggressive force that it has to have the right to defend itself, which is a clever trick, which is facilitated by I have to say, the United Nations, who haven't covered themselves in glory whatsoever over the Palestine issue. And it's another establishment. I talked about the FIFA guys, but the UN are far more complicit in dumbing down the Palestinian rights and causes, arguably, than any other institution.
Yeah. I spent a long time working in and around the halls of the United Nations for 5 years. I would be meeting with ambassadors and diplomats. So I have a good understanding of how politics works at the United Nations. I was a lobbyist trying to get states to agree new international law against artificial intelligence weapons, which Israel uses to kill Palestinians. The UN is a comfort blanket used by both organizations, individuals, and states to not take action. So what happens is everyone will be aware that Israel needs to be defeated, the genocide needs to be stopped, and their reaction to that is to say, oh, let's make a statement at the UN, thinking that that's going to resolve the issue. And what is that person doing? They're abdicating their own responsibility by saying it's the UN. So it just becomes a repository for people's sense of blame and a way to push back any meaningful action. So the UN should not see it for what it is. It's a political theatre. If you see it as that, then you can still engage with it, but don't take it seriously. It's a theatre. But actually, I want to pick up on something Lubna said about the secularization and the godlessness of kind of how responses happen. In Islam, we have the Quran, right? The Quran is a guidebook for how we should live in this world. And it talks about jihad, right? This is a word that needs to be engaged with. It means both internal and external jihad. Very often in the Quran, it talks about the responsibility of Muslims to take up arms against oppression. The Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is filled with examples. And in fact, the Prophet would say, those who are not fighting, we use strong words, we call them hypocrites, and say that they are destined for hell. Muslims, I have found in my last 2 years, acknowledge that Israel needs to be defeated. I've got this knowledge over many years and decades of experience with Israel. But why are we not calling for jihad? This is a sacred and fundamental duty, but it's also an international legal obligation now. It's also morally the right thing to do. It is, from a humanitarian perspective, the right thing to do. We have the Quran, talks about jihad. We should be calling for jihad. And I've been calling on Muslim leaders for 2 years to make the statement because it is a powerful obligation, a sacred obligation on all Muslims to take up arms against this evil oppression. And that's what we should be doing.
Well, striving for justice, striving for goodness and balance and human civilization, that's literally what jihad means. And it can become in all sorts of forms. And I get it. And also in physical war terms, and the Quran does also say very clearly to Muslims that if you see there's a troublemaker, somebody who creates fitna, who's deliberately oppressing or going out to cause violence and injustice, then it's the obligation of the majority of people who see that happening to unite in terms of military terms, to actually put out that one troublemaker. And I can't think of a better example of that actually needing to happen other than the current Israel-Palestine or Israel-West Asia scenario. Because Israel isn't just now pummeling Palestinians, it's pummeling Syrians, it's pummeling Lebanese. I mean, just today there have been Lebanese deaths and etc. Palestinians, of course, let's not forget, straight after the ceasefire was declared, dozens were killed. One whole entire family was, I think, was more or less wiped out as well. So they broke the ceasefire literally as it started, but they're going beyond that and they're threatening perhaps a world war. So your idea of an armed resistance to contain Israel isn't just about Palestine to me. I think it seems like it could be a world war scenario that could be prevented if people take action now. But there's not that realization, I think, of the gravity of what's about to come with their proposed war on Iran, which they're getting America firmly ready for. So what I'd like to come back to with you, Lubna, is in terms of, let's take Yahya Sinwar, now a martyr, somebody who's revered by the Palestinian movement and anybody who regards armed resistance or justice as a cause. There's an interesting reaction I found from somebody called somebody called Yisrael Ziv, a former head of operations in the occupation army. And he said, he admitted that Sinwar's prophecy is coming true. Our legitimate war, i.e. the so-called Israeli legitimate war, has become illegitimate. And the image of Israel in global public opinion is collapsing. The support of friendly countries for Israel is shrinking every day, and here he, Sinwar, succeeds from the depths of his grave in standing up to Israel. So has that armed resistance worked?
Well, it's worked in the sense of opening the world's eyes to what's been happening in Palestine for decades, and many people who didn't know now do. I think the whole world is aware. And as we know, they will always attempt to delegitimize our resistance and fighters. And he was a man who died fighting on the ground and stood by his morals and stood by his people. And remember, they are the democratically elected resistance and government of the Palestinians, which they again try to deny. And the propaganda war machine is just as participant in this genocide. You know, the mass misinformation. They do it historically, like they did to the Congolese, the Irish, everyone, even the Jews who fought in the Warsaw ghettos were still condemned as terrorists, and Doug Donalds too. So we make these parallels and the comparisons. And yes, he did, like many others, they assassinate anyone who's vocal enough, anyone who resists. They will take out our leaders. But what we must remember is this will branch out into a regional and, as you said, potentially a world war issue. This is an issue that doesn't just concern Muslims, it's an humanitarian obligation that should concern everybody. If this can happen and be permitted against the Palestinians today, who will it be tomorrow? And Israel's made clear their Greater Israel project. They've already been attacking Syria and Lebanon. I mean, who next? Like the Yemenis are the only ones who've been really active in consistently fighting against this. And we have a lot of respect and admiration for our brothers and sisters in Yemen. And this is what's needed. There needs to be worldwide condemnation and intervention, because anyone that continues to permit the existence of an Israeli state is signing our death sentence, is slamming in the nail of the apartheid coffin. That is in short what will take place. And it is setting a foundation for far worse injustice to follow if it is not challenged now.
Well, a couple of statistics for you, Ousman, to react to, because I know you're advocating, this kind of, this negation of any easing up of the campaign and the pressure to get some sort of real physical military intervention. The UN could do it. They've got instances where they put peacekeeping forces with arms and weapons out in, Angola, I remember very famously, and to stop the Rwandan massacres and all sorts of other places. So they do it. But in Palestine's case, they obviously seem to be exceptionalizing Israel. But a couple of things for perhaps everybody to note. 200,000 tons of explosives have been dropped on Gaza. That's basically over 2 years the equivalent of over 13 times the force of Hiroshima, the bomb in Hiroshima. That's 13 times. And the result of that is 268,000 homes destroyed, 2 million people displaced, of course, 94% of farmland ruined, and fisheries totally obliterated. So if we allow this to become the norm, when on the one side we've got all this mantra about climate change and ecocide and whatnot, here we have the same people, the same governments, the same nations literally allowing an ecocide which is poisoning the air, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur, countless particles that make even breathing perilous in Palestine. And according to an outfit called Nemirock in 2024, they said Palestinian Institute for Climate Strategy says 362 million tons of CO2 were released in Gaza. And that's over 15 months. And it's more than what 100 countries produce, CO2-wise, in a year. Yeah. That's shocking. So there's this kind of silent ecocide, killing plants, killing trees, killing animals, destroying the citrus, farms, the beautiful olive farms, etc. Yeah. It's not just been a killing field for people. It's a killing field of the planet as well, which they're experimenting with.
I just finished reading this book, which I recommend others to read, called The Destruction of Palestine is the Destruction of the Earth by Andreas Malm. And it shows the origins of the transition to fossil fuels in the 19th century, where the British naval fleet gained an upper hand by transitioning to coal, right? The very first coal ships that were used were to destroy Akka. It was against the Palestinians, right? And they decimated Akka. This is in the 19th century. And this book actually tracks the correlation between the rise of fossil fuels and the actual oppression of the Palestinian people, not just symbolically, but actually practically, pragmatically in terms of policy. I said this when it came to autonomous weapon systems, artificial intelligence weapon systems, that Palestine is being used as a test, a laboratory for what will then happen to the rest of the world. That is also true in the sense of what we are willing to ultimately accept. Right now, we have accepted all of those atrocious statistics because the worst that we will do is go on protest and say, very, very bad, hypocrites, hypocrites. We're not actually stopping it. And the only way, people don't understand this, I'm speaking the truth. This is not an advocacy attempt. I'm speaking the truth. The only way to stop Israel is to stop them. You need force. Unless we start articulating that, arguing for it, mobilizing for it, then this will get worse and we will all be next. Anyone who doesn't have power is next. We need to save Palestine, not just to save ourselves. We talk about Palestine liberating us, but to save the entire planet, right? This is
okay. Tel Aviv Tommy Robinson has just been allowed back into Israel. We're giving a red carpet. He's a Zionist, a sworn Zionist. He's a racist. Yeah. He's stirring up conflict in Britain and across Europe as well.
Yeah.
So the chicken is coming home to roost in Britain as well. We've got a team up of Zionists and racist right-wingers who are literally becoming mainstreamed in reform and others, using issues like immigration, conflating it with Islamophobia, conflating it with support for Palestine and Gaza, which they also regard as these kind of foreigners who we shouldn't even be concerned about. The right wing does. Okay, we talked about the left, but the right wing is really vicious in Europe right now. And my point was that really, where do we go? Because they're opening up fronts on so many levels. And you've talked about this AI intelligence field that you're in, which is fascinating. We'll probably have to have a separate conversation about this sometime. But you know, the power that exists, it seems to me that you talked about as well, is so deeply embedded within our society and the establishment now that, let's give one example. Nuclear weapons, Israel, we know, after Vanunu and his revelations in the Times back in the 80s. Since then, everybody knows Israel has nuclear weapons. It said there between 90 and 400 of them. They are not inspected by the AIEA. They're not subject to the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty. They're not in any way given any kind of recognition by the Americans, because if they did, it would mean they'd have to move in on Israel, so they don't even recognize it has them. Yeah. Yet we've got a power which is not only nuclear equipped, but it also has a Mossad and a Zionist lobby and agencies which, using the Pegasus systems of surveillance, using their artificial intelligence, and using the cyber tech outfits which have been infiltrated by the Unit 1800 alumni, who are now spread over all across the cyber tech industry at the highest level.
Yeah.
That, when you understand that, and you talk about challenging that power, militarily, I get it. How do you challenge that power that is embedded, that could literally have the codes for the nuclear weapons of Britain in its hands? Yeah. It could have the American nuclear codes, for all we know, because of the intelligence networks. That's that deeper, deep state control that Israel and Mossad and the Zionists have, which also goes under the radar. What do you say about that?
La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. The Quran tells us, do not fear your oppressor. Do not fear Israel. Do not fear America. There is only one power that is worth fearing, which is Allah, to whom we are all returning. That is the essence of the Shahada. It is also, if you want to talk about it in an Islamic sense, it's also liberation. What we talk about liberation. Liberation is actually a process of destruction. Stop being scared of everyone. You don't need to be. Allah is with us, and to victory belongs Allah. Right? That's how I see it Islamically. But we have to recognize our own inner power, our own agency. Yes, I've been persecuted. I'm facing trial for supporting terrorism in January. I lost my position in the humanitarian field for speaking out for Gaza. I've been a barrister representing oppressed people for 20 years. Every step of that has only made me more free, and I'm settled with that. And I'd invite everyone, we've been going on this journey together, come to the ultimate conclusion. Israel is nothing. We have no fear. We do not need to fear them. They can't control us. Yes, they may have all of the weapons in the world, but they do not have, I would say, they do not have Allah. Even the Jewish anti-Zionists, the Orthodox Jewish anti-Zionists, have a really interesting point on this. They stripped God from Judaism and created an ethno-nationalist death cult. Right? They've been telling us that for decades. They stripped God from their movement. We have God, and remember that we have God, and that is to whom we are returning. It's a simple philosophy, and it's written in the Shahada.
Well, powerful and very, very profound and honest words there. Lubna, we're coming to the end of the show. We've packed a punch here. I think there's been a lot of things that have been said which we could really have spent an entire program. There are themes in this that we could have stretched out and gone into details with, but it's good to give people an overview of the kind of resistance which is the right of humanity according to the UN Charter, but also do it in a way which I think releases the fear, which Ousman's talking about. I mean, people will be scared of even talking about Yahya Sinwar. They'd be scared of mentioning the word Hamas. They'd be scared of mentioning the word Hezbollah because they're proscribed in this country. They're not prescribed by the UN. They're not prescribed by the bulk of the world. But it seems that an Anglo-Zionist imperialist, minority has the ability to create the sense that actually people who may simply be fighting for their natural right of self-defense and protecting their families and homes are turned into villains and turned into terrorists. Who's the real terrorist here, Lubna?
Those responses, I mean, where do we begin? I mean, certainly Britain has its hand deeply covered in the blood of our people. I mean, the beginning of this country, and we need to cut the umbilical cord. I mean, this Israel is the imperialist watchdog of the Middle East. This is what they want, and to be able to control those regions and control us and erase us ultimately. So they will do everything to protect that by delegitimizing and demonizing anyone who resists. And as you quite rightly pointed out, I mean, the UN haven't prescribed them, the majority of the world hasn't prescribed them. And of course, here expressing our outward support will land you in arrest of supporting, under the Terrorism Act, to support a prescribed group. But we can say that we support the de-prescription. And irrespective of what people might or might not think of Hamas and other resistance, you have to understand that we have a right to resist, and we must exercise and protect that and destroy and dismantle anything that's going to prevent that right. Every oppressed and occupied people has a right to resist. And that must be reiterated across the movement. And people need to not fear what is happening and to speak up against it, but to fear more actually what they do and what is coming to them if they fail to oppose what's happening now. And as I've said before, what's happening to the Palestinians, now it sets the foreground for far worse to come at everybody else if we don't oppose and challenge this from now. So we have to keep the fight to economically, politically, legally and morally isolate them. We can dismantle it. It needs to be done. The Palestinians deserve nothing less than complete liberation. And by, as we're saying, what is taken by force ultimately can only be returned by force. So we will support in full every oppressed and occupied people to resistance, to self-determination, and for the full isolation of these forces.
Well, that's, again, I think a good place to perhaps conclude it, but I will give Ousman one last summary, let you do the summary of where you think the future is, because, everybody thinks it's over now with the Western media's propaganda. They'll be saying, genocide over, switch off.
Yeah.
What do you think is the roadmap for the resistance and for any civilized human being with regard to Palestine?
I want to talk about a very important political moment. We're at a very important political juncture because we spoke about the UN, which I don't have any faith in, but at the same time, there is a movement from the global south to achieve an armed protective force. Politically, that must be supported. It is a viable means of actually stopping the genocide, the IOF. So that has to be supported. Gustavo Petro is calling for that right now. We all should be visibly supporting that. That's politically. But I think recognizing that Palestine is also the destruction of the earth, as I said earlier, we need to start having radical truth about what Zionism is and liberate ourselves and get rid of the IDF or IOF in our own hearts. They win through controlling us through fear. Liberate ourselves and realize there is nothing to fear. Our freedom is not something that can be taken or given or granted. It is in there. It's universal and true, eternal, right? So recognize it, liberate yourself and feel your own power and agency right now to call for military intervention and ultimately carry on until we win, until victory.
Thank you very much, Ousman, and thank you, Lubna. We could have gone on another hour here, but I'll save it for another show. And thank you for watching this edition of the Deep Dive Perspective. As usual, we haven't pulled punches. The fact of the matter is there can be no peace without justice. And the fact also is that no empire has ever given up its imperialist colonial hold and the boot on the neck of those people it oppresses without an armed resistance and without some kind of military, holistic, pushback. So when people ask for their basic right to be acknowledged, that they should be able to resist by any means necessary, it's surprising that the Western media obfuscates and makes all sorts of strange arguments for how that can't happen and how, in fact, the oppressor and the tyrant is a victim. I mean, I'd never seen an imperialist force really cloak itself in victimhood. The British Empire didn't do it. The American Empire hasn't done it. The Mongols didn't do it. No imperialist force has had the audacity and the chutzpah, is that what they call it, to actually try to play the victim while actually murdering babies, daily, publicly, and videoing them, and laughing and joking about it, and celebrating it. I mean, where's that ever happened? I can't think of anywhere else. When Henry Kissinger was orchestrating the killing fields in Cambodia, I didn't see any of that. In Vietnam, we didn't see any of that. This is unique. This is a unique psychotic reality that we've got to start coming to terms with, and conflating issues like Judaism, anti-Semitism, Jewishness, the religion itself, the people, the ethnicity. This game also needs to come to an end, and we need to clarify that Zionism is a political ideology. It needs to be dismantled, in my opinion. It needs to also be replaced by, first of all, a referendum of the real Palestinians. They need to be given the right. The right of return is absolutely integral. The one-state solution possibility is only a solution which is called Palestine, not Israel, because the very basis of what's happened is an illegitimate act which had nothing to do with the acquiescence of Palestinians. And anybody who has their home stolen, and then somebody comes in and says, I'm taking 4 rooms, you can have the toilet, and then we'll have a gun pointed at you there. And if you come out of there, you have to do it the way we want it. Would you like that? In your own home, would you think that's acceptable? And then if you went to your local council and said, I've got these terrorists who've just taken over my house, would you kindly come and help them? And the Met Police and everybody turns around to you and say, no, actually, the problem is you, and you're not allowed to resist this, and it's okay, and we're legitimizing it. Where on the planet are we going to ever be able to accept that? Who would accept that? You wouldn't, I wouldn't, and the Palestinians certainly shouldn't. Thank you for watching this edition of Deep Dive Perspective. Until the next show, goodbye.